Google's much-anticipated Gemini has been delayed. On Monday, November 6th, OpenAI held what was unarguably one of the most exciting days in AI development this fall, which was their OpenAI Dev Day. On that day, we got new GPT-4 Turbo with a 128K context window. We got the Assistance API. We got custom GPTs. We had all of these things showing just how quickly OpenAI is moving. Then just earlier this week, we heard from Microsoft, and they had made their latest AI announcements. Meta is constantly in the news with some feature or another, and Amazon is rumored to be working on something as well. And the question that this has left, summed up by Playground founder Suhail, tweeting on that day, the day of the OpenAI Dev Day, where is Google? Well, where Google is officially delayed with the release of their Gemini model. So what we are doing today is we are talking all about what's going on, why the delays are happening, and what we know right now. So first of all, let's talk about what this model is. Gemini is not Bard. Bard is, of course, Google's currently available model, and to its credit, Bard continues to get updates. We talked earlier this week about the fact that Bard now has improved mathematical capabilities and has been officially released to more age groups. Specifically, it has been made available for younger people after a bunch of testing and working with experts to make sure it is more safe. Bard is also starting to get code interpreter or advanced data analysis type of data visualization capacities, which should make it even more useful as well. But what people have been really waiting for is not Bard, but a more advanced model, which many have assumed would be the first to actually challenge the supremacy of GPT-4 from a performance standpoint. And indeed, the last reporting that we had suggested that Gemini was right around the corner. On September 14th, the information reported that Google was nearing the release of its Gemini AI model based on the fact that it had started to give access to companies outside of Google versions of the model. According to 3 people who had direct knowledge of the matter, giving outside developers access to Gemini suggested that Google was getting close to officially launching the thing. Now, there are a bunch of things that people have been looking forward to when it comes to Gemini. First of all, it was supposed to be natively multimodal. And second, as the information writes, Gemini has an advantage over GPT-4 in at least one respect, said a person who has tested it. The model leverages reams of Google's proprietary data from its consumer products in addition to public information from the web. As a result, the model should be especially accurate when it comes to understanding users' intentions with particular queries, and it appears to generate fewer incorrect answers known as hallucinations. The information had also previously reported that Gemini had greatly improved code generating capabilities, which is of course a major initial use case. And on top of all of that, there's just a speculation around how much power had actually gone into this model. Analyst wrote a post that very clearly got under Sam Altman's skin because he seemed to comment on it on Twitter later. On August 27th, they published a piece called Google Gemini Eats the World. Gemini smashes GPT-4 by 5x, the GPU pours. Now, Analyst is a blog that follows the semiconductor and chip industry, and what they wrote in this piece was that the sleeping giant Google has woken up, and they are iterating on a pace that will smash GPT-4 total pre-training flops by 5x before the end of the year. The path is clear to 20x by the end of next year given their current infrastructure build-out. Now, they noted whether Google has the stomach to put out these models without publicly neutering their creativity or their existing business model is a different discussion. Now, this blog post was not claiming that just having more computing power necessarily meant making a better model. They were just identifying that Google was, as they put it, the most compute-rich firm in the world. So, the point that I'm trying to convey here is that there has been a lot of hype around Gemini. However, every time things get pushed back, the bar that it needs to clear gets a little bit higher. As Jim Fan from NVIDIA wrote, expectations for Google Gemini is now ridiculously high. Gemini has to check off at least one of the following: 120% IQ of textual GPT-4, or 100% of GPT-4 but at half the cost or 2x speed of Turbo, or 100% of visual GPT-4, or natively supports long videos, and ship the API in Q1 of 2024. Now, Jim suggests that they had to ship the API in Q1 of 2024 to meet expectations, but I think we are already well past the point where everything feels delayed. And indeed, that is sort of the thrust of the information article, which was published just yesterday. Google delays release of Gemini AI that aims to compete with OpenAI. The piece begins, Google's company-defining effort to catch up to ChatGPT creator OpenAI is turning out to be harder than expected. And apparently, it wasn't just reporting from the information, but Google representatives had actually told their business partners and cloud customers that they would have access to the new Gemini model around November. Well, here we are in November, and the company has recently told them to not expect it until the first quarter of next year. There are a bunch of reasons this is problematic. One of them, which isn't just related to how cool people think they are in the AI space, is their actual bottom line. In recent earnings reports, While Microsoft's Azure cloud business outperformed analyst estimates, Google had their slowest quarter of growth since something like 2019. In other words, having access to things like OpenAI's models is making a meaningful difference in how Google is competing on that core cloud business. Now, what's more, the information notes that the delays around Google having a credible competitor to ChatGPT, and more specifically the GPT-4 API, means that not only are they losing out on that consumer brand opportunity, but they're also losing the affinity of developers. The more that people start building on top of GPT-4 and GPT 3.5 and OpenAI's APIs in general, the harder it's going to get for Google to win developers over to build this next generation set of applications on their tools instead. There is a real platform lock-in that can happen, which can be extremely challenging to try to dislodge. There's also the fact that success when it comes to use of artificial intelligence tools is somewhat self-reinforcing, in that the more that OpenAI's ChatGPT gets used, the better data OpenAI has to improve ChatGPT in the future. Now, spokespeople for the company have sort of tried to delay and deflect. Spokesperson Catherine Watson says we're not commenting on rumors or speculation, and Google CEO Sundar Pichai said at a public event that they were, quote, focused on getting Gemini 1.0 out as soon as possible, make sure it's competitive, state-of-the-art, and will build from there on. As recently as an investor call on October 24th, Pichai said that they are, quote, laying the foundation of what I think of as a next generation of models we'll be launching all throughout 2024. So what are the possibilities here? Well, one of them is, of course, something similar to what caused Amazon's shifted plans last year after ChatGPT came out. Remember, Amazon was planning on releasing a model called Bedrock at their annual event last November, but at the last minute decided to delay. Lucky they did, because in the middle of that event, ChatGPT was announced, and it just blew what was then Amazon Bedrock out of the water. Of course, that caused a switch in strategy, and Bedrock instead became the enterprise sandbox, through which Amazon helps its enterprise and business customers customize their own models and select from a variety of different models designed for their own specific purposes. But perhaps Google Gemini is going through something similar. In other words, as painful as it is to delay, it is still infinitely better to delay rather than put something out that isn't actually as good, or frankly isn't meaningfully better than OpenAI's models. Now, the other thing is that there are a lot of different pieces of software that Gemini has to actually power. The information writes, Google has high hopes for Gemini that go beyond boosting enterprise software sales. The company wants it to power new tools for creators on YouTube, such as the ability to generate custom backgrounds for videos, and improve the capabilities of Bard as well as Google Assistant, Google Siri-like voice assistant for phones and other devices. Apparently, according to people with knowledge of the project, Google has developed several different versions of Gemini, including some smaller versions of the model that have been tested by outside developers, but that primary biggest version of Gemini remains incomplete. Kind of reiterating what I just said, the information writes, a key challenge for the Gemini team is making sure the primary model is as good as or better than OpenAI's most advanced LLM, GPT-4. It's not clear whether Google has met that standard, said a person who's been involved in the effort. Now, other speculations outside of just raw performance relative to GPT-4 is that some specific use cases for Gemini involve different types of capacities that just might not be ready yet. For example, they talk about advertising, which is of course the vast majority of Google's revenue. Here's how Gemini describes the challenge. Gemini also has a longer memory of a user's interactions compared to earlier Google LLMs such as PaLM 2, which currently powers Bard and generative AI results in Google Search. The longer memory could allow advertisers to compare the performance of campaigns over time. For instance, an advertiser could use the model to create new variants of the best performing ad copy over the last month. Now, of course, that's not a trivial thing to do. Increasing memory and contextual understanding is a big challenge. Still, it seems like part of the biggest reason for the delays are more on the organizational side than anything else. Basically, two teams that were separate, Google Brain and Google DeepMind, had to come together to work on this model. That merging is a real challenge. Even if everyone is totally aligned and totally in sync, which is very hard to achieve on its own right, bringing two totally separate teams together to actually work productively, especially when they're both bringing their fits and starts and things that they've experimented with and things that have worked and haven't, and biases and ideas and basically their past track record, it's no mean feat. Now, also, apparently, Google co-founder Sergey Brin has been involved in the conversations, not as a formal decision maker, but as offering criticism and feedback on Gemini. And as much as some people are reporting that, like this shows how serious Google is about this effort and how big a deal it is, which is true, I also don't know that it's the best strategy to have a founder with a controlling stake but no actual decision-making authority, other than implied decision-making authority, involved in running a team that needs to be highly efficient and directed. There's nothing to indicate that this is happening, but I can see a million pitfalls around leadership and who's actually in charge and who has authority, and it just seems like a big challenge to me, and not necessarily a sign of strength, let's put it that way. To many, what this looks like is a classic situation of Google being trapped in the innovator's dilemma. A blog post recently came out, What I Learned Getting Acquired by Google, and excerpts from that seem to give a picture of just how hard things are to get done inside that company. Shreyans Bansali, who wrote the piece, writes, Google is an ever-shifting web of goals and efforts. Amazing things are possible at Google if the right people care about them. A VP that gets it, a research team with a related charter, or compatibility with an org's goals. Navigating this mess of interest is half of a PM's job. And then you need the blessing of approvers like privacy, trust and safety, and infra capacity. It takes dozens of conversations to know if an idea is viable, and hundreds more to make it a reality. And that's the happy path. Amazing things are possible at Google if the right people keep caring about them. Team goals can change in any given quarter, and entire teams can disappear in the face of a reorg, a phenomenon so common that Googlers can look past the tragedy and see the comedy in it. Suppose you dodge all those bullets, you might still wake up to find that while you were working on your project, two distant teams were also working on the same idea, and the time has come to fight it out because now only one can proceed. The internal users of the losing projects will find that the API they depended on is now deprecated, but the replacement, well, it's not quite ready yet. Googlers wanted to ship great work, but often couldn't. While there were undoubtedly people who came in for the food, worked 3 hours a day, and enjoyed their early retirements, all the people I met were earnest, hardworking, and wanted to do great work. What beat them down were the gauntlet of reviews, the frequent reorgs, the institutional scar tissue from past failures, and the complexity of doing even simple things on the world stage. Startups can afford to ignore many concerns, Googlers rarely can. Jim Fanigan extends this thinking into the world of AI and writes, this sheds light on why OpenAI spearheaded the LLM revolution, even though most of the foundation tech originated at Google. Google is right in the thick of the Innovator's Dilemma. I'm sure they know very well the power of foundation models. After all, they invented Transformer, AlphaGo, and Flamingo, the key ingredients of GPTs. Yet it is so difficult to justify diverting resources away from the ongoing profitable products, or potentially even cannibalize search to promote LLMs. Citing the article, Google is an ever-shifting web of goals and efforts. You need all the relevant higher-ups to agree on the agenda, actively fight for enormous resources, and push back against all the other parties that want the minimal disruption. Too many stars need to align. That is a very tall order. That being said, I don't think it's fair to blame anyone. The institutional bureaucracy is a natural emergent property of companies at this scale. 10 years from now, OpenAI and Anthropic may suffer from the same if they grow to that order of magnitude. I think Jim is right, but I also think it doesn't matter. Ultimately, this battle is now, not 10 years from now. And right now, Google is losing. However, counting them out too early seems a little premature to me. And so for now, we're just going to have to wait and see what actually comes out with Gemini. That's going to do it for today's AI Breakdown. I appreciate you listening or watching as always. Until next time, peace.